From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's today's lineup. K-State's Liz Boyle will be along to take a look at how the pandemic has impacted smaller meat processing operations in Kansas and how it might have actually spurred growth in this enterprise. She'll be taking that topic up tomorrow at K-State's virtual Cattlemen's Day. Then the new head of K-State's Department of Agronomy, Raj Khosla, will talk about his outlook for the department, and he'll report on his ongoing work with soil moisture sensor systems for crop irrigation management, where they're on the verge of finalizing impressive new technology there. He'll explain. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Ward Upham on preparing the garden site for early vegetable planting. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome once more to another Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. Always glad to have you along as we preview yet another facet of the event that's coming up. Tomorrow, virtually, K-State will be hosting online its 108th Cattlemen's Day. And you've still time to register and be part of that occasion. We'll tell you more about that later. One of those sharing information at Cattlemen's Day tomorrow, meat specialist K-State Research and Extension, Liz Boyle, and she will be looking expressly at the impact of the pandemic on our small meat processing sector here in Kansas. Liz, you have had a long and fruitful working relationship with the small meat packing sector here in Kansas. Just the general state of that industry as you would view it.
Right. The industry has changed a lot in the last 25 years since I've been here. Initially, we had over 150 plants in Kansas, and that number has slowly declined over time with retirements, with just the change in the industry. So we've seen a lot of dynamic changes over the last 25, 28 years. I think we're going to continue to see those changes, especially as a result of the pandemic. What we're seeing now is a lot more interest in these small meat processing facility. There are quite a few individuals who are interested in purchasing plants or constructing plants to provide more opportunities for local producers to have outlets for harvesting their animals.
Interesting trend. I want to address that in just a second and what individuals pursuing an operation of this type would need to think about. As you look back at the pandemic, what sort of hurdles did it present to the local plants?
I think some of the hurdles that we saw were primarily such an increased demand with requests for reservations for harvest that most of our plants are currently booked out to 2022. Still today, there's just a huge demand, and there's so much uncertainty, even with the COVID vaccine, of what's going to happen with our supply chain. And so people are looking at, I'm going to make sure I have a reservation to get some animals harvested because I don't want to be caught with having animals that I can't do anything with. It costs me money to feed them. I can't get them harvested. What do I do now? I've worked with a lot of producers who called me, asking, where can I get this animal harvested? I can't find any place that's open. There's actually an interactive USDA directory online that we would work with to narrow down the scope of the area that they wanted to try and find a harvest location. And it's a searchable database, so I could put in sheep slaughter or hog slaughter or beef slaughter, and then provide them at least with a list of phone numbers in the region that they could attempt to call and get on a waiting list in the event there's a cancellation.
We want to remind folks that you avail yourself as part and parcel of your role here at K-State to be the intermediary to help make those connections, right?
Right. We try to make those connections. In visiting with some of the plant operators, they have said that their businesses are so busy that they want extra staff, but some of them have trouble finding extra staff because we have some big challenges with workforce development for the meat industry, and that's nothing new. There was a legislative post-audit done back in 1997 that said the exact same things. One of our challenges, why we're seeing a decline in our industry, is because of workforce talent. We really don't have many training opportunities to train an individual on how to work in a small meat plant, how to harvest, how to fabricate, how to further process. There's opportunities like that if you're in a college program where we have classes at K-State where we teach collegiate students, but we really don't have a program, more of a workforce development program for training people who want to work in a small plant. So there's a few groups around that have picked something like that up that I've seen where there's some online training, but not really hands-on training. And I think one of the big barriers to that is time and money, because it's very expensive to provide that hands-on training just because the facilities are so expensive.
So remedies aren't easily at hand here.
No, they're not.
It'll take a while for that to evolve, it sounds. Liz, back to the actual mechanics of a small locker doing business operating. Were protocols necessary to keep those going much as they were with the larger packing plants?
Absolutely. So our very small plants had to implement social distancing, face masks. Actually, I worked with a colleague of mine at the University of Nebraska, Dr. Dennis Burson and Dr. Gary Sullivan, and we put together a fact sheet that specifically dealt with COVID-19 procedures for very small meat plant operations. And we made that available to the industry in English and in Spanish.
As you said earlier, overloaded schedules at these local plants. As you look forward, will the industry here in Kansas and elsewhere be able to accommodate the greater volume? And in fact, will this result in a quantum shift in small packing?
I think the biggest factor is probably community relationships and the relationships between the producers and the small local processors. So there, for example, there was one business, they had just taken over a business prior to the pandemic, and there's reports saying that their business was pretty slow for the first 6 months, and then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden they had bookings a year out. So it's fostering that relationship with the local community and the producers in that community so that it's mutual, that the producers feed their animals into the small processing facilities so that the small processing facilities can stay in business and rely on a steady stream rather than it being sort of more boom or bust where certain times of the year their schedules are more fully booked. One of the things we saw last year was a lot of our plants declined to process venison. So for our hunting population, they were left with very, very few outlets of where they could take their animals to be processed.
For somebody or a group looking to enter this venture, what are the things they need to think about? You mentioned community relations and identifying your market. That's got to be one of them. But what other things are you recommending to those folk?
I would recommend they work with a small business development so that they get their business plan in place. All too often, some of the calls I receive, people are wanting to get in the meat business who have absolutely no background in processing or fabrication, but they've got some financial backing to start a business. So the questions I might get is, where can I hire someone who can get this business started from a functional standpoint? And that's the challenge. Again, it gets back to that workforce development, that talent development of people with those hands-on skills, and then enticing them, if you can locate them, entice them to want to come to a rural community in Kansas So it has to be a certain personality who wants to work in a rural community, who has those skills, and there's enough financial support to make it worth their while to do that.
And seek out information and assistance, input, and again, you avail yourself as one of those who can be a conduit to all of that. And it's going to take some diligence and some research and so forth. But the decline in the small meat packing sector in Kansas may be reversing, it sounds.
There's new members, according to Carol Clemma, who's the executive director for the Kansas Meat Processors Association. She said they have 9 new members from last year, which is a really big increase in their membership. And I think the trend we're seeing across the U.S., there's a lot more interest in the small meat processing industry. Chris Young, who's the executive director with AMP, the American Association of Meat Processors, has said that some states are more evenly dispersed in where their very small plants are. Kansas is not one of them. We're sort of more in different pockets here and there. And so I think there's opportunities. But again, starting a plant isn't a small financial venture. It's the regulations associated with the meat business dictate what people need to do. And if someone's interested in getting started, one of the big things they need to learn are some of the regulations associated with the business. The Kansas Department of Agriculture, Meat and Poultry Division is very helpful with that. If they're interested in the USDA, working with the USDA out of their Springdale, Arkansas office, they can provide some assistance as well as contacting us at K-State.
And to point out, you'll be availing yourself for the question and answer session at Cattlemen's Day tomorrow, and we'll field anything that comes up along this line.
That's correct.
Liz, thanks for coming over. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Eric.
Research and Extension Meat Specialist at K-State, Liz Boyle there. Again, she'll be on the program at Cattlemen's Day 2021 tomorrow, which we'll fill you in on further later on. And she's been talking about some of the developments in the wake of the pandemic as per the impacts on our small meat processing operations in Kansas. We'll return shortly with more. This is Agriculture Today.
For information on threatening weather, you should depend on the National Weather Service and their broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is an all-hazards radio network that provides up-to-the-minute weather information, including life-saving warnings anytime, day or night. NOAA Weather Radio also broadcasts information on man-made disasters, such as chemical spills, amber alerts, or other national emergencies. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Next up for you, an introduction. The Department of Agronomy here at Kansas State University recently appointed its new department head. He's a familiar figure in the area of precision agriculture, crop production more specifically, and he has now taken the helm of the Department of Agronomy, and it's our first chance to visit with him since that happened. Raj Khosla is with us. Raj, you have been here in Manhattan before, we might note, so welcome back and congratulations on the new appointment.
Thank you so much, Eric. And you're exactly right. My work has brought me to Manhattan numerous times, and this is our new home since last Christmas. So, my family and I are really delighted, honored to be here in this position, and I'm looking forward to learning more about Kansas and the department, our faculty, staff members, our students, and how we could continue to carry forward the legacy, a very strong legacy that we have, not only in the state of Kansas, but, influential in the region, nationally, and I would say globally.
About your background, though, would you fill folks in on your long interest in precision agriculture?
Yeah, my entire career has been dedicated to precision agriculture, which, 30 years back was a new way of doing crop production. Today, global positioning systems and its applications in farming is not new to, any farmer in any state. And I know part of the reason my work has brought me to K-State numerous times in the last 20-some years is because of the interest in how could we continue to produce more, do that more efficiently, with less resources that go into the production system and be profitable at the same time. And when precision agriculture came into existence, it gave us a new way of thinking. How do we apply the right input at the right time, at the right place, in the right amount, and in the right manner? The 5 R's of precision agriculture, which are commonly being used worldwide. Kansas is a great example where our farmers continue to push themselves. How do we make the most efficient use of resources so that we could be on the pathway of sustainability?
Precision agriculture has become so far-flung. The applications are just amazing. They continue to build upon themselves. Just reflecting a bit back on your most recent stint at Colorado State University, what are some of the more exciting areas under the umbrella of precision agriculture?
Right. If you look at the first decade of growth in the 1980s and then leading up to into 1990s, our focus was on the precision of the equipment. How precise could we be driving the tractor? Fast forward, today farmers are using auto steer and auto guidance equipment that will allow them to farm their ground without even touching the steering wheel, thanks to technology and high precision global positioning systems. Then our focus changed on to variable rate technology. Could we vary the rate of application of inputs that go into the crop production systems, whether it's fertilizers or other agrochemicals that go into production system? More recently, water. Kansas happens to be the 6th largest consumer of water in crop production systems in the union. And so how could we protect our natural resource as valuable as water by applying the right amount at the right time at the right place? And we can do that. Precision agriculture plays a very pivotal role in addressing that challenge. And really, as the growth we witnessed in embracing precision agriculture over time, we realized that for farmers to really take advantage of what precision agriculture offers in terms of technology, we had to work really hard on the science part of precision ag. In many of my previous talks, I've mentioned that technology is ahead of science. Let's consider water as an example. Today, we have commercially available technology, either linear irrigation or center pivot irrigation systems, that allow you to apply water how much you want, where you want, when you want in the field, at every nozzle level. What we don't have is the capacity to come up with a prescription map that allows you to take full advantage of the technology, to enable that technology to apply how much we want, where we want, and when we want in terms of water. So we felt that there is a gap in science where we really want to quantify how much water is or soil moisture is in the soil, when and where. And to do that, scientists all over the world have used remote sensing. Some of them have done soil sampling. But what happens is that you still have to draw upon the average number for that entire field. So a recent change that has happened is, could we have sensors that could actually measure soil moisture in the field? A sensor that is cheap enough that you can distribute in the field in dozens, if not in hundreds. So this is something that my lab, along with 2 other labs, one from California, UC Berkeley, and one from Colorado, CU Boulder, and my lab has been working with, funded through a federal agency. We're trying to develop next generation of sensors, where these sensors are small, they're battery-less, they're highly inexpensive, and you can distribute these sensors in your field in dozens and dozens of these sensors, because our target price of these sensors are less than $1. We're expecting these could be in pennies. And then you don't have to go back and collect these sensors at the end of the growing season. These are made out of biodegradable material. So after a year or two, they will totally dissolve in soil.
Wow.
And when you actuate these sensors in a millisecond, so in a very tiny fraction of time, it gives you an instant measure of how much soil moisture is in the soil profile. Now, that information is very critical in deciding how much water to be applied, where and when. So that just gives you a tip of the iceberg in the direction the technology and science is moving, enabling farmers to maximize the efficiency of our natural resources.
Before we leave that topic, those sensors then are performing as intended in registering that soil moisture?
They are in the developmental phase right now.
Okay.
When I moved from Colorado State University to Kansas State University, we have moved that project to here. And my PhD student right now, we're in the fourth or fifth crop cycle of evaluating the performance and the development of these sensors, along with my colleagues from CU Boulder and UC Berkeley. So we hope that in another year or 18 months of time, we should have sensors that we can hold them in our hand, that can be demoed in farmers' fields, and we take it to the field where we can start evaluating their performance in the real world.
That has promised to be a very exciting advance. Looking forward to that, Raj.
It is very exciting. I'm very happy to be involved with that kind of development.
As you said, that's just one mere example of a myriad of possibilities under precision agriculture theme, if you will. And as you lead the Department of Agronomy, it's a big pie to oversee.
You're exactly right. We have a very large department and very strong department with lots of competencies and areas of expertise that we really excel in. I continue to learn about our department, what we do well, and where could we invest further to continue to lead the department that it has such a strong legacy. And so in the next 6 months or so, I envision to continue to interact with my faculty, students, staff, field faculty. We have several research centers and several field stations that are spread throughout Kansas. They're meeting the local needs of our farms and farming communities, addressing challenges that are unique to them. The challenges that we see in western Kansas are quite different than what you see in eastern Kansas. And I'm just getting started to learn deeply into that.
Looking very much forward, Raj, to your leadership for the department. So many encouraging and exciting things associated with it and its work and its good people there. We will undoubtedly talk again soon. Thank you for joining us right here today.
Thank you so much, Eric, and pleasure was all mine. Look forward to working with you.
He's again the new head of the Department of Agronomy here at Kansas State University, just taking over that post a few weeks back. Raj Khosla, our guest on this part of agriculture today, and we will return with more for you in a few moments on the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Agriculture Today continues now on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you, and on we go now to today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN, beginning with this one final reminder about Cattlemen's Day 2021 out of Kansas State University, virtually, and it'll take place tomorrow. You still have time to register. It's a free program. It'll start with the welcome from K-State's Mike Day at 9:30, At 9:45, from Purdue University, Jason Lusk on the pandemic effects on the U.S. beef industry. At 10:30, two individuals from the Radian Group, Jason Rumley and Robert Norris, on 2020 beef processing, retail, and food service COVID insights. At 11:15, K-State's Sandy Johnson takes the helm to talk about reproductive technology resources and current tools. And once more rounding out the program, K-State's Liz Boyle, whom you heard from earlier on the pandemic effects on small Kansas meat processors. It'll all wrap up with that question and answer session right at noon. To register for Cattlemen's Day, go to asi.ksu.edu/Cattlemen's Day. Again, asi.ksu.edu/Cattlemen's Day. It's on the slate for tomorrow morning. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack held virtual discussions this week with Mexican Secretary of Agriculture Victor Villalobos and with Canadian Minister of Agriculture Marie-Claude Bibeau. Vilsack said that Mexico is not only a key trading partner, but also an important collaborator addressing climate change and food security. The two committed to boosting scientific and technological cooperation at all levels of agriculture. Villalobos said that the objective is to achieve better production and guarantee food security. Vilsack said the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico was strengthened with the treaty between the Mexico, U.S., and Canada interests. Vilsack also said that the two sides will work to increase productivity with sustainable practices of all producers and in reaching being self-sufficient in the North American region. Relative to his discussion with his Canadian counterpart, Vilsack said he expected to work with her on climate-smart food and forest practices and delivering science-based solutions to help mitigate and reduce climate change. From the Canadian side, Bibeau said they agreed on a mutual interest in science-based international trade, with both sides agreeing that working on those issues is key for agriculture. There was very little mention on any side relative to trade issues between the parties, such as dairy and Canada, and products like potatoes with Mexico. However, Villalobos will soon be visiting Washington to discuss issues like biotechnology, fertilizer management, and trade issues. A federal court in South Carolina granted a 60-day stay in an ongoing lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's Navigable Waters Protection Rule. The EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers asked for that stay from the U.S. District Court for the District of South Carolina to allow more time to review the rule. The lawsuit was brought by the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League back in July of last year. In this motion granted by the court on Monday, the agency said the additional time will allow for continued review of the rule, which is largely supported by agricultural groups. Also playing into the court's decision, the pending Senate vote on EPA Administrator nominee Michael Regan, who told members of a Senate committee that he intends to engage the agricultural community on the rule. The Senate has yet to set a date on the vote for Regan's nomination, by the way. The federal government said in its motion granted this week in South Carolina that the additional 60 days allows more time for Regan to be confirmed and to review the rule. While serving as Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Regan objected to the Trump administration's Navigable Waters Protection Rule. He was asked during a hearing last month before the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works whether he supports a new WOTUS rule similar to the 2015 rule that agriculture and other industries fought in court. He responded there he had understood it is difficult for any kind of federal regulation to truly address the unique agricultural needs, as he put it, for different regions. So quoting him, "I want a rule that moves forward, that's not overly burdensome, but gives the states the flexibility to protect water quality and protect the local agricultural economy." Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. And bringing that to us, as always, is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Kerry Weefald joins us. She is Agriculture Marketing Director with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And Kerry, the month of March also means we celebrate it as Kansas Ag Month.
We sure do. March is Kansas Agriculture Month, and the Kansas Department of Agriculture and our ag stakeholder community across the state are very excited to promote agriculture as well as celebrate specifically on March 23rd which is Kansas Ag Day. The theme this year is food. I think we've learned this past year that Kansas agriculture plays a very critical role in terms of providing essential workers and essential food to keep our supply chain moving. So this year, it's extra sweet that we celebrate our Kansas agriculture community. Within Kansas, we have about 71 agriculture, food, and food processing sectors that combine for about a $50 billion economic impact on the industry. And as a state, we rank 5th in USDA census in the total value of agriculture production. So we have a lot to celebrate during the month of March, and our ag stakeholders have identified several different opportunities to raise awareness about the specialness of the Kansas ag industry during the month. During the month of March, Midwest Dairy will be offering recorded virtual tours of Kansas dairies. We will have a virtual AgriLand, and then, for example, the Kansas Horse Council will be celebrating Kansas agriculture with EquiFest March 5th through 7th. Another special and very new thing is the Kansas Farm Food Connection will be offering boxes to a target audience of 25 to 55-year-olds in Kansas, happen to be moms or those who predominantly do the shopping in their household. And the boxes will celebrate agriculture and be delivered with samples of a variety of agriculture products that are grown or processed in the state of Kansas. This is an effort with our From the Land of Kansas team. On March 23rd, the actual Kansas Ag Day, while visitors to the State House in Topeka are limited, we have a group of stakeholders who will be delivering goodie bags to our elected officials featuring Kansas ag products and then talking also about the economic impact of agriculture and our food sectors within the state. So follow on social media. On Twitter, our hashtags are KSAgMonth and hashtag AgDay21. And then you can also find a variety of resources from Kansas ag stakeholders online at agriculture.ks.gov/KSAgMonth.
Carrie Weefald is the Agriculture Marketing Director with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and she joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Greg Akagi there. Many thanks, Greg. And we will return with this week's horticulture segment for you. That's next on Agriculture Today.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so stay a minimum of 6 feet away from others and stay home if you can. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Agriculture Today concludes now with our weekly horticulture segment. We're to that time, or very nearly so, to start another vegetable gardening season in Kansas. And some preparatory thoughts toward that end now, featuring K-State horticulturist Ward Upham. Ward, thanks for coming by, and the conditions are starting to shape up for our vegetable gardeners to get after it. And the one thing to do right out is to assure that that planting site is ready to go.
That's right. So for most people, what that's going to mean is you're going to turn that soil, either till it or use a garden fork to turn it. Now, some people don't. They're going to just keep mulch on there. But if you till or if you use a garden fork, check to make sure that there's no frozen soil. Probably we've been warm enough now that that's not going to be a problem. But if you push your fork in and it stops, it may have run into frozen soil. The other thing to watch is make sure there's not too much moisture in that soil. Again, we've been dry enough this year that I doubt that's going to be a problem. But if we do get rain, check that soil before you till.
And there's a simple process for doing that.
There really is. And so what you want to do is just take your shovel, go straight down, and turn that shovel full of soil over. From the bottom of that, take your soil and squeeze it in with your fist. Water comes out, of course, it's too wet. But even if water doesn't come out and you push your finger into it and it doesn't crumble, it's too wet. And so what you want is squeeze it, push your finger into it. If it crumbles, you're good to go. And so that's the first step. Tilled soil is going to dry a lot quicker also than if it's untilled. And so if you do get a rain after that, at least you'll be able to get in and plant a little bit easier.
That's step number one. Step number two, some folks remember this, some folks don't. That is taking a soil temperature reading on your garden.
Yes, it's really important to do that. A lot of people just look at air temperature, but soil temperature is every bit as important because it determines whether those roots are going to grow. And so we have two sets or two groups of plants we normally grow in vegetable gardens. Those are the cool season and the warm season crops. So cool seasons are those you put in the spring. They include things like peas and radishes is lettuce from seed, and then from plants or transplants, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, those types of things. They're usually put in relatively early, like in the Manhattan area toward the end of March, maybe early April, somewhere right around in there. Warm season crops include tomatoes, peppers, sweet corn, all the vine crops like cucumbers, watermelon, muskmelon. All those are warm season. For the cool season crops, you want at least 45 degrees soil temperature, 2 inches deep. For the warm season, 55 to 60 is where you want to be. And so, especially with some of the sweet corns, the extra sweet corns, you may need that 60 degrees. So take that temperature at about 2 inches deep and make sure it's stable. It stays there for several days in a row. What you want to do is take that temperature maybe about 11 in the morning. Gives you a good average temperature. If you're working at that time, take it before you leave for work and when you get home and take that average. And that will give you a good idea of where you're at. And then look at the forecast. You don't want to plant and then it's going to get cold for a week. Right. And so if everything lines up right, then you're going to be ready to plant. For your cool season crops, even if you plant them early, they won't rot. Warm season crops will. That seed will rot if you get it in too early, so you have to be really careful.
Once more, though, as we start our gardening, that 45-degree range is a good place to be. And as far as taking that reading, it's a device that one can find handily.
That's right. What you want is a soil temperature thermometer. This is going to have a metal probe on it. And so you can get those at garden stores, but you can also get them at auto parts stores because they use this very same thing to check the AC, the air conditioning, what the temperature is there. And so if you can't find a garden store, check your auto parts store and ask for an air conditioner thermometer, and they should have it. It does have a metal probe, so you can push it into the soil, and it's more than long enough that you can get down to that 2-inch depth.
And the 2-inch depth, that's the place from which to take that reading.
That is. And so if you're at the right temperature at 2 inch, you're going to be okay. Right at the surface, it may read a little bit warmer than what you would want to plant at, and deeper, maybe a little bit cooler, but 2 inches is about right.
So you've tilled up your planting area, you've gauged the soil temperature to see if it's go time, and then one can plant some things quite early. What would be the earliest?
The earliest would be peas. Peas you could actually plant down to about 40 degrees. They're not going to do much, but at least you can get out there and do something. All the other cool season crops, you're looking at 45, but peas you can put in at 40. Again, even if they sit there for a while, they're not going to rot. They're going to be okay. The other thing to watch with peas is rabbits love them. Yeah. And so you're going to have to probably put up some sort of fencing because it's going to be the first thing that comes up, and they're going to go after them.
Stepping back for just a moment to that soil preparation, Ward, if that soil is in need of a boost in organic matter, this would be an ideal time to do that.
It really would. I mean, fall is an excellent time too, but spring before you plant is a good time to do that. Organic matter improves any soil. If it's a sandy soil, it acts as a sponge to hold water and nutrients. If it's a clay soil, it makes it a lot more tillable, a lot easier to work with. And so what we normally recommend people do is to till first, add 2 inches of organic matter, and till again. And that will allow that soil to get those good characteristics that organic matter adds.
If one goes through all of this and somehow a rainfall is in the forecast and folks don't want to have to wait out the drying of the soil one more time to plant, they can actually cover that area, you say?
Yeah, you can just use a tarp. If it's a small area and it's practical, just use a tarp to tarp that area so that as soon as the rain stops, you can get out and plant. You don't have to wait for it to dry.
A couple of the primary first crops of the season, they'll go in fairly soon. The potatoes and the onions. So aiming toward that, a lot of gardeners are anyway.
They really are. The traditional time for potatoes is St. Patrick's Day. Onions are going to be about the same time. And so those are some of our crops we're going to look at. If you're doing transplant, it's going to be cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, that type of thing.
Point being, you should be looking for your material fairly soon for potatoes and onions.
That's right. Make sure you get certified potatoes to make sure they're disease-free.
Well, we are very near off and running on another vegetable gardening season in Kansas. These are good preparatory steps to square away before you put that first crop in the ground. Ward, as always, we appreciate the input. Thank you.
You bet.
K-State Research and Extension horticulturist Ward Upham with us on this week's horticulture segment, reminding you once again, Keep tabs on what's going on in the field of horticulture, gardening, and otherwise via the K-State Horticulture newsletter out weekly. It's easy to find. Just search for K-State Horticulture Newsletter. And that's our time for this Thursday edition. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Please be back with us right here tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good day for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.